Salutations readers, welcome to or welcome back to the City Girl Writer channel. My name is Nkechi, and for today I'm doing a tarot cards gives book recommendations kind of a video. Now this is actually my very first book recommendation video, and because of that I'm actually kind of nervous to make one because, well, I never really know what to really recommend to people that I haven't been like, oh, I might wrap up like, oh yeah, I read this book, I really liked it, I recommend it to y'all if y'all want to give it a try or whatever, you know, what have you. So I figured, you know what, let's use something that I like to use all the time, but make it something related to books. And I thought tarot cards. Now, this is my sole kind of tarot card deck that I have. This is not the whole entire deck. I only have the cards that I will be showing y'all for this video. But this particular deck is called Tarot of the Divine, which is made by Yoshitani. I will link down their website in the video description so y'all can check them out. But I do have everything regarding the actual tarot cards itself. So like I have the box, so if you buy the deck, this is what the box will look like. It will have all cards and a booklet that gives you pretty quick explanations on the cards themselves and their meanings and all of that. All that in here. And there is also a bigger dedicated handbook so that if y'all want to get more further explanations and maybe some descriptions and stuff on the actual cards themselves and some blank space for some notes, I definitely recommend this if you want more further detail on the actual tarot cards and what each of the cards will symbolize themselves, because each of the cards actually features a myth, fairy tale, folk tale from around the world. And actually, if you want to know like the tales behind each of these cards with the tarot cards, then I recommend Beneath the Moon, Fairy Tales, Myths, and Divine Stories from Around the World, which pretty much just gives you a generalized summary of a particular card. So I recommend, if you do get the tarot card deck, to get these two as well. So if you really want to be like really into what these cards mean and all those are the stories behind the cards themselves. So definitely recommend all that. And yeah, without further preamble, let's just get to the book recommendations. So I want to forewarn y'all that I'm not an expert on tarot cards, so my interpretations of these cards are really based on what I understand and what I just interpret from the meanings of these cards, and I don't always remember what they necessarily mean, and I also don't really know I don't really remember the actual stories behind the cards themselves. So if you want to know all that, definitely check out all of that from the description with all the books and stuff. All right, cool. Just want to put all those disclaimers. Yes, now let's get into, well, the actual book recommendations. So for January, the very first card that I pulled for the year was the Five of Coins, which is represented by the Little Match Girl, which is a Danish fairy tale. The Five of Coins represents financial misfortune and the denial of support. And there are keywords, 3 keywords: destitution, abandonment, and hunger, specifically for the Five of Coins. Now, I have thought of a book that will represent the upright meaning of each of these cards and the reverse meaning of each of these cards. Now, mind you, you don't have to do upright, reverse for tarot cards if you don't want to. It's not a necessity. I just did that because I thought it would be kind of interesting to think of what would these cards, like if I were to recommend a book specifically on specific meanings of these cards, then what have you. So for the Five of Coins, I thought of the Popular Trilogy by R. F. Kuang to represent the upright meaning, because if you don't know, this entire story is a pretty devastating historical fantasy series, and this is actually pretty much based on the Second Sino-Japanese War, and we follow a morally gray character where she starts off going into a military school, but then she gets into war, and it's just a whole lot. And just seeing the graphic, horrifying depictions of war in that series it was a lot. Honestly, I read the entire trilogy in like 3 months, so like back to back, and I was like, y'all, I don't recommend that, honestly. It was a lot. I definitely recommend pacing yourself on that one, especially since like the Five of Coins literally represents like misfortune and denial of support. So, you know, there's just a lot. There was a lot for the series. It's a really great series, mind you, though, because it has really great characters. I really like, that's like R. F. Kuang's debut novel series. So definitely recommend it for people if you can handle the content warnings. So definitely look up content warnings on that trilogy. And now for the reverse meaning of Five of Coins, I thought of Unwieldy Creatures by Adi Sai. This is a queer, biracial Frankenstein retelling. And I really recommend it because it's not quite in the sense of like devastation like the Poppy Word trilogy, but in the sense of there is this sense of hopefulness and this exploration of gender and sexuality and being queer and finding belonging and acceptance, which is kind of like what it is for like the actual original story of Frankenstein. Not in the sense of like Victor Frankenstein, but more in the sense of actually Frankenstein's monster, which I thought was really cool. Now for the month of February, I pulled the Moon card, which is part of the major arcana, if you do not know. So this card is showing Princess Kaguya, which is pretty much a Japanese folk fairy tale. But the Moon card itself represents illusion, withheld information, and an unclear path forward. So the keywords here are mystery, trickery, and trepidation. This one was a very interesting card to get in February, honestly. But I definitely thought of, I know the perfect book that really fulfills the upright meaning of it. And I will recommend y'all The Last Tale of the Flower by Rashani Chakshi. This book is giving everything regarding illusion, withholding information. Like just based on the synopsis alone of the bridegroom trying to like not pry into his wife Indigo's past, but some things are going on in this childhood home that they've been in and staying in, so some ain't right. And then you get like perspective of Azure, who is Indigo's best friend when they were in childhood and all that. Like y'all, it's a lot. It's trippy, it's dark, it's gothic. I've already talked about this book a lot in my, I think it was my May-June wrap up, but I just recommend it, especially for the upright meaning because of the amount of mystery and trickery and illusion here. Especially since it has very flowery writing and you're not totally sure what's fantastical, what's real. And I think that's really cool, especially for something that's gothic. So yeah, I think it just makes sense. Last Tale of the Flower Bride, you know? It makes sense. But if you want something that's a little bit less illusion-y, trippy kind of stuff, I will recommend Honey and Spice by Bolu Babalola for the reverse meaning, which is pretty much more joy, enlightenment, and stuff like that. And I really loved Honey and Spice, which was surprising to me. I did not think I was gonna love it, because if you don't know me, contemporary romance is not really my thing, but this one really worked for me. I just love the witty banter. I love the chemistry between Kiki and Malachi. I liked the fake dating situation. It was just all good. I like the pop culture references. It just all worked out for me. It worked really well, and I really would recommend y'all, if you want something that's not really trippy, there's something like pretty straightforward, but like something that actually gives you joy, that you don't feel like you're walking on eggshells kind of a thing. All right, for March, I pulled the Four of Swords, which is represented by Fenrir, which is based on Norse mythology. But the Four of Swords represents the rest period between battles, the calm eye of the storm. So the key words here are respite, recuperation, and reflection. So I no longer own the books for this particular book recommendation, but I really like these books. So for Upright, I thought of Last Final Call by Chloe Gong. This one was just a really nice book. I really like this one. I would just recommend it. It's more specific. It's not really a broad recommendation though, because I only recommend it for people who have read These Fine Delights, Our Valiant Ends, and Follow Your Fortune. Because it will not make any sense based on the synopsis, because it is a collection of 2 novellas in this world, Secret Shanghai universe, so it won't make any sense unless you've read those books. So not quite a fair book recommendation here, but if you are a fan of Chloe Gong and you haven't read Last Final Call, check it out. Not much to say, too much spoilery stuff, so yeah, sorry about that. But if you do want something though, at least a recommendation for this particular card, I would say Lakeler by Anna Marie McLemore. Now I will say it's been a while now since I read this book. I mean, it's only been a few months. I mean, I read it like in June, but there's just so much about it that I really enjoyed, about following these queer, brown characters. It's not quite like a coming of age tale, but just seeing them going through life and having this like magical realism element in here. I don't know, it was just a really trippy kind of a book, but I really just had a great time with it. I don't really know how to like really explain it. I do need to reread it, but I will just say, if you really are someone who really likes the audiobooks, then I definitely recommend the audiobook production of it. There are multiple narrators, and I think having multi-POV, narrators really made the story really cool. So yeah. Now in April, I pulled the Four of Wands. The people in here is Mohini and Arvan, which is from a Sanskrit epic poem in India. But the card Four of Wands represents a celebration of happiness before the next challenge, and the keywords are rejoicing, community, and warmth. Now, I own both books for this one. So for this card, I will recommend Jade Shards by Fauna Lee and Hamnet by Maggie R. Farrell. So Jade Shards for the upright meaning because of community and family, and just, it was just really nice just to see these characters again in a prequel short story collection. But then I will also recommend Hamnet for the reverse meaning because there's a lot of grief and devastation, which is pretty much in the synopsis because we don't know. This pretty much just talks about how Hamnet, who is William Shakespeare's son, how he died from the Black Plague, and how he actually wrote an entire play inspired based on his son, like not based on his son, but like inspired by his son, like Hamlet, you know. Yeah, but this one, mostly devastating. Not a very long read, but definitely emotionally impactful. So definitely check this one out. And if you're here for someone, like, you know, all the things that have been going on in the Greenbone saga, you just want to like come back into the world with familiar characters, definitely recommend Jade Shards if you have not already. Now, for the month of May, I pulled Judgement, which is part of the major arcana. For this person right here, we actually see Sun Wukong, or the Monkey King, which is based on Chinese mythology. Judgment represents responsibility, accountability, and facing the truth to move forward. So the key words here are reckoning, absolution, and understanding. Now, I also own 2 books for this recommendation. So I will recommend Saarland by River Solomon and Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin, which is very interesting actually on how both of them kind of have their own sort of reckoning and understanding, but in very different ways. So first up, with Saarland, we are following a teenage girl named Vern who gives birth to twins in a forest after escaping a cult, a religious cult. Well, actually not really a religious cult, actually it's just a cult. And then we have Giovanni's Room, where we're following, I forget these characters' names, but honestly I don't think the names really matter. We're just following this American white dude who moves to Paris and he meets Giovanni, and they have like their own romance love story kind of thing, but it all kind of goes to shit. Very small, packs a punch, I will have to say. So I recommend both of these books. Actually, they're both kind of similar in their own ways because of the fact that we're dealing with queer characters who deal with internalized homophobia. I mean, this one is because, for Saarland, is because of the fact that Vern grew up in a cult that is pretty much very much homophobic. And then here in Giovanni's Room is pretty much like our real world dealing with homophobia during like the 1950s. So yeah, but this one's a lot more rampant internalized homophobia that mostly goes unchecked. But it's kind of like the point of the novel though, but definitely fair warning though on internalized homophobia and also misogyny. It's a lot, it's pretty rampant in here. But if you do want something that's more like a modern gothic horror novel with like some sort of sci-fi / speculative element, definitely go with Saarland, especially with the amount of gothic horror. There's like a lot of body horror, so definitely look up content warnings on this one. There's a lot of body horror. There's graphic pregnancy scene, which is in the first chapter, so fair warning on that if you're squeamish in that one. But it's only in the first chapter. It's only that one scene. There's no other pregnancy scenes. But definitely recommend both of these books. It's actually kind of interesting too is that while I was reading Saarland, it actually mentioned Giovanni's Room. So I found that to be very, very fascinating. But yeah, I recommend both of these books. Now, for the month of June, I pulled the Three of Swords. The person here is showing the Crane Wife, which is based on a Japanese fairy tale. But the Three of Swords represents betrayal, in both sense of from an outside source or from an internal struggle. And the keywords are heartbreak, self-harm, and desolation. So I also have 2 books here that I think I will recommend to someone if they ever pull like the Three of Swords. First up, I have The Stationary Sharper by Marjan Kamali and Masters of Death by Avi Blake. Now this one is going to be a little bit of a stretch, honestly, for these. I say The Stationary Sharper because there is indeed some heartbreak, because this is indeed a historical, contemporary-ish, it is a dual timeline kind of a thing. We're following these 2 characters who fall in love in Tehran, Iran, but then there's civil unrest, and then they pretty much separate for decades, and they don't come back until like they're old and stuff. So we go back and forth in time when they were in Tehran, Iran, and then more like the early 2010s in the United States. And then for Masters of Death, we pretty much just do with a pretty big cast of supernatural characters who we do with a medium. We're doing like a Filipino vampire, angels and demons, ghosts. We got all kinds of things going on here. Half god, demigods. It's a whole other thing. There's a lot going on in here. But I would recommend both of these books for this particular card, because this one deals with a heartbreaking love story, which I did feel pretty much well. I didn't cry, but I felt emotional while reading this one. And if you know me, romance is not usually my thing, but this one really got to me. It was so beautiful, very, very lovely, really well written too. I think I listened to the audiobook production of this one too, but it was really good. I actually really needed to reread this one because it was just so good. Like, I just want more people to really read it, and also for the love story. Now, for Masters of Death, though, this one has to do with just, I don't know, this one was just a little bit interesting because there is sense of betrayal. We do have some sense of morally gray characters in here, too. But I think in the way that these ones end is a little bit more on the hopeful side, where they just kind of work out in their own weird, convoluted ways. But I still recommend it because, I mean, Olivia Blake is indeed an author I'm kind of like a hit or miss with. But I do think that her writing style and the way that she writes her plots and characters worked well, for me personally, in Masters of Death than any of her other works. Especially if it's something worth more fantasy. Like, this is definitely a lot more fantasy because we're doing with supernatural creatures. Recommend both of these books in regards to Three of Swords. For July, I pulled The King of Coins, which shows the character, this shows the story of the World Turtle, which is based on, I think, Iroquois mythology. And the King of Coins represents stability, assurance, and the ability to carry the weight of the world without hesitation. So the key words here are dependability, success, and steadfastness. So I thought of The Surviving Sky by Kritika H. Rao for a good recommendation for King of Coins, because this has to do with a world where people are relying on these floating cities because the earth is not in a state where it's really livable, or at least they're trying to make it seem that it can be livable. But the idea is that you're really dependent on people to keep this floating city afloat. But if you keep reading the book, you kind of see that, yeah, that's not going to really work like that. It's just not going to work. It's not really sustainable. And it's actually a first in a trilogy. So this is an epic science fantasy adult series. It's called the Rages Trilogy. The sequel comes out next in the summer. And I just recommend this one because we are dealing with characters that, well, they make some questionable decisions, and they are married, which is, I think, very cool to follow in a married couple, but it's a marriage in trouble kind, which I think even makes it even more interesting. Personally, I think I'm very, very fascinating. I just highly recommend giving The Surviving Sky a try if you have not heard me talk about it enough already. But then also, though, I would also recommend The Sleepless by Victor Manibo, this one is a queer, speculative, futuristic mystery thriller where it's like 20-ish years into our future, where we have to deal with people who have hyperinsomnia, so they can't really sleep. And I think this one really fits with like the King of Coins in the reverse, though, because there is a lot of talk about, like, it has very much anti-capitalistic, anti-consumer themes and messaging in here and some commentary. So definitely fulfills that. So, like, you know, not just always stability. Sometimes it just goes with instability and corruption and materialism. So yeah, if you want something that's giving like anti-capitalism commentary and themes, definitely check out The Sleepless. Now, in August, I pulled The Magician, which is very much early on in the major arcana. Now, if you could tell here, if this character looks familiar, it's because we have the fairy godmother, but specifically in the Cinderella tale, which is a French fairy tale. But if the magician represents everything, that you have everything you need within reach. Although you do need to have the will to grasp that. So the key words here are transformation, manifestation, and power. Now, I have also owned both the books here for this recommendation. And so I will recommend The Spirit Custody Water by Sam Jimenez and A Diary of Blood by St. Gibson. Now, y'all already heard my thoughts. I spoke a lot about The Spirit Custody Water. In fact, I will link down below my book review video on it. But again, if you want something with transformation, power, especially with dealing with gods and a journey and having everything you need, you just need to just really have the will to grasp it. I'm like, if you want to have where like, hey, you have everything you need, you just need to go on a journey, go with The Spirit Custody Water. If you want like a queer love story that's also very violent and stuff, and like just magical and just it's just everything, like, please just read The Spirit Custody Water. I've talked a lot about this book, so please just read it. Now, for A Diary of Blood, though, this one has to do with the reverse meaning of the magician, because despite the fact that the fairy godmother can grant you wishes, sometimes the fairy godmother might be little bit malicious, maybe even manipulative, which if you've read A Diary of Blood, you do know that we do deal with Dracula's Bride, and we do have Dracula, who is not mentioned by name, but this does have dark topics and themes and content warnings regarding abuse, emotionally, verbally, physical abuse. So definitely recommend A Diary of Blood, because I think this is handled really, really well, and it has really good writing. And also, if you're here for queer polyamorous vampires, A Diary of Blood is that one. Okay, it's just that book for it. So yeah, I will recommend both of these books. Now for September, I pulled the Page of Cups. Now for the character here, we have Bakunawa and the Seven Moons, I think, which is based on Filipino mythology. But the Page of Cups, though, represents a dreamer who is fully connected to his emotions and spiritual desires. So the key words here are imaginative, affectionate, and intuitive. So I think I found like the perfect books for this card. So first up, we have The Death of Vivek OG by Okweke Emezi. Honestly, a lot of Okweke Emezi's works probably could fit with this particular card, but I went with The Death of Vivek OG specifically because this is a very emotionally just devastating kind of book, and it has to deal with characters kind of coming to terms with their sexuality and just their relationships with other people. So yeah, and it actually definitely talks about spirituality in here, like Okweke does with every single one of their works. And yeah, I don't know, I just really, really recommend this one. I did read this one last year, so my thoughts on it is kind of a little bit blurry here, but I do remember feeling emotionally devastated in this one. And it does talk about a death, so yeah, forewarning on that. Definitely look up content warnings, though, for this one. But I just really loved Okweke Emezi's writing. I just think that the story was just, it was just a lot, you know? It was a lot at the time. And I do need to reread it because I'm blanking on other things. But I just recommend this one if you have not already. And especially if you want to like try Okweke Emezi's works, at least just in a general sense of their writing style, I would say give The Death of Vivek OG a try. But then, as far as the reverse meaning though of the Page of Cups, I would recommend Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. Now granted, I did not love Yellowface, but I will have to say the reverse meaning of the Page of Cups just made me think of Yellowface. I mean, like, what are you doing with like delusion and just like lack of control and self-loathing? Like, we have all that. Yellowface with June. Like, June is the Delulu queen, okay? She was a lot. But I do recommend it, though, for at least the talks of cultural appropriation and racism in the publishing industry. It does have some pretty interesting topics that's talked about. I just think that sometimes I feel like I wish it was a little bit more sharper, but it doesn't negate how what R. Kwong wrote was indeed really, it was still good. It was just that I wish it was more, but I still recommend it regardless if you haven't at least give it a shot. So yeah, I will also link down my reading vlog for it though down below. For October, I pulled the Seven of Cups, but as you could tell here, we have Aladdin, but we have the Persian version of this story, and the Seven of Cups represents a multitude of dreams and fantasies, of which potentially none are viable. Now for the key words, we have daydreaming, imagination, and wishes. So for this card, I definitely will recommend books that are a little bit more trippy on the sense of you're not really sure on what is real and what's not real. So I went with Catherine House by Elizabeth Thomas and This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El-Muhtar and Max Gladstone. Both of these books were kind of trippy, but this one was trippy in the sense like you really were not sure, like, wait, was this real? And it had an open ending. And I have a dedicated reading vlog for this book, so definitely check out that book down below on my full thoughts. But even then, I'm still pretty much undecided on the rating. Still, y'all, I'm recording this in December, and I still am not totally sure on my rating on that one, so still unrated. But as far as this one, though, this one's just a really great gothic literary suspense novel. I definitely felt the suspense. I definitely felt the gothic elements and everything. It was just really trippy. Like, I really was not sure. I'm like, wait, was this real? Is this, like, what's going on here? I'm not totally sure. But unlike with, like, This Is How You Lose the Time War, this one was kind of trippy in the sense that we were dealing with time travel, and a lot of the sci-fi stuff regarding the time travel, I was not totally sure. But one thing that really stuck it out for me, though, was the sapphic yearning between red and blue. Like, those two, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to keep reading just for y'all, because the sci-fi stuff, I don't know what's going on, but this, though, if you want sapphic yearning, read this. So yeah, I recommend both of these books just to give it a shot. They're kind of weird, but I think if you want to give it at least a try and go for the ride, you will not be disappointed. So for November, I pulled the High Priestess. Now, I cannot pronounce the name of the story with this character at all, but I do know it's an Arabic folk tale based in Turkey. The High Priestess represents listening to your subconscious and trusting your heart. So the key words here are wisdom, secrets, and intuition. So this one, I had to kind of like sort of bend on what my interpretations on this, but again, the thing about tarot is that not everyone has their own interpretations on tarot cards, so you know, this is just going to be my interpretation on the meaning of these cards regarding these book recommendations. But I would recommend Open Water by Caleb Zuma Nelson and The Mask of Venus by M.A. Carrick. Now, as y'all will be seeing this video, I have not put up my November and December wrap-up, and I did read Open Water in November, so y'all will get my full thoughts on Open Water. But I would recommend this one. Now, if you do not know, though, I did read Small Worlds by Caleb Zuma Nelson this year. I liked it, didn't love it, but this one, though, no spoilers on much, but I did love this one. It was really, really good. I had a good time with the lyric. I love the writing. I love the story where we're going. I have a couple critiques, so it wasn't perfect, but I do recommend actually checking out Open Water. Now, The Mask of Mirrors, though, this one was interesting because for the reverse meaning of the High Priestess, we're dealing with secrecy and lack of trust, which I think makes sense if you've read The Mask of Mirrors, because we are dealing with a character who is a con artist. So she has to pretty much trick people into thinking that she is a noble woman and who does have a rightful place to this noble house so that she can have money and all that stuff. But also in the sense of like the fact that this entire book is actually part of its trilogy. And this trilogy has a particular magic system. It's actually more than one magic system, and one of the magic systems has to do with like tarot cards themselves, which I think is very much apt and very much appropriate for a book recommendation based on tarot cards giving book recommendations. So I think it all makes sense. But yeah, I would recommend The Mask of Mirrors. Now, this was a slow read, despite it is a thick book. It is thick. But I did read this via audio, and I was following along with the physical copy. The audiobook narrator, Nikki Masood, did a fantastic job with differentiating of characters and their voice, not just the voice, but also the accent. So I can actually tell who is who and who is switching disguises, like when they go from being one kind of person to another. Like, perfect job. I recommend the audiobook. Please recommend it. So yeah, I will recommend The Mask of Mirrors and Open Water for the High Priestess. Now for December, this last card, which surprised me honestly that I even picked this one up. I didn't think it would be another major arcana card, but we are here, and I'm kind of somewhat familiar with the story behind this one, surprisingly. I'm talking about the Wheel of Fortune, and if you don't know what this character is, that is Anansi, which is based on Akan mythology, specifically in Ghana. So the Wheel of Fortune represents movement and a swift reversal in fortune, and the key words are luck, karma, and change. Now this one was a little bit difficult to really think of, like, what books would I recommend y'all for this kind of card. So for the upright meaning, though, I thought of the Radiant Emperor duology. So that is She Who Became the Sun and He Who Drowned the World by Shelley Parker Chan. So I read She Who Became the Sun, I think in September, but then I read He Who Drowned the World in November. And that book made me go, oh, this one. First of all, y'all will get my full thoughts in my November-December wrap-up, but y'all, that was an amazing conclusion to this duology. I recommend it. But if just for, like, at least the She Who Became the Sun, at least, I would recommend this entire duology for the Wheel of Fortune, because it does talk about fate and change. And if you don't know what the story is, it's actually a queer historical fantasy retelling of the rise of the Ming Dynasty and the rebellion against the Mongols. So yeah, honestly, this was really, really good. I really do recommend this series. Again, I will talk more about it later, but yes, if y'all really liked She Who Became the Sun, I truly believe He Who Drowned the World was better. And then for the final book I will recommend, though, for this video, and for also the Wheel of Fortune, I recommend The Good House by Tarana Reeve Dew. Again, I read this one in November, so y'all get my full thoughts then in my wrap-up. But I really do recommend, though, The Good House. I had a fantastic time with it. I listened to this one also via audio, solely via audio, but it is narrated by Robin Miles, who is the narrator of the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. I love the audiobook production of that entire trilogy, so I really like The Good House. It's indeed an older title. It came out in like 2000, the early 2000s. But I do think for a book that was published like in the 2000s, I think it held up pretty well, personally. And it was really good horror, so definitely recommend it. There's not much on the synopsis, and honestly, it's definitely best if y'all do not know too much. Just know that we're dealing with a person who's returning to a childhood home after the death of her son. So yeah, that's all you need to know. There's nothing else y'all need to know besides that. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all my book recommendations, all the cards here. So yes, all of the cards right over here. The tarot cards we talked about here. And I just want y'all to know that I really like using tarot cards, and I love reading in books, and I thought it would be really cool if I can have my tarot cards decide on, well, what books should I recommend to y'all? And I think this one was good. I think so. And I do kind of want to do this, maybe not really annually, because I think it might be a little bit hard to get the right book recommendations, but maybe like every other year, maybe every year, depending on how many books I read in a year. Because I do want to recommend books to y'all that I have read within that year, or maybe the past couple of years or something. Something more recent, for sure. And yeah, maybe if I can find some more opportunities to talk about tarot cards in some more future videos, y'all let me know if y'all want that kind of content. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Please let me know in the comments down below on y'all's thoughts on these tarot cards, like the actual deck itself. If you use tarot cards, do you use this particular deck? Do you use a different deck? What are your thoughts on my interpretations of these cards and my book recommendations regarding them? Would y'all read these books based on these tarot card interpretations and how I talk about them? I don't know. Y'all give me your thoughts on any of this. I'm very curious. Like it if you like the video, comment, subscribe if you want to. If you've made it this far into the video but you're not totally sure what to say, but you want to leave me an emoji, leave me a card emoji. But anyways, thank you again for coming to this video, and I hope to see you all in my next one. Bye.